January doesn't fail because people lack willpower. It fails because most people enter the new year lying to themselves. They call it motivation, but what they're feeling is just temporary excitement, a short chemical spike triggered by the illusion of a fresh start. The brain mistakes a new calendar for progress, and when progress is felt without effort, effort stops feeling necessary. That's why January is dangerous. Not because the year starts hard, but because it starts too easy. Gyms are full, notebooks are clean, promises sound beautiful. Everything feels possible when nothing has been demanded yet. But the human brain hates sustained effort. It evolved to save energy, not to honor abstract promises made during emotional highs. Here's the part most people avoid. Most January goals are dead on arrival. Not because they're too ambitious, but because they're not tied to identity. They're wishes, not decisions. Statements, not silent commitments. You don't fail because you're weak. You fail because you try to change behavior without changing who you believe you are when no one is watching. Eastern masters never used the beginning of the year as a psychological reset. They used fatigue, discomfort, the moment when the mind asks for relief and you learn not to obey. Real transformation begins when enthusiasm ends, not when it appears. If you're here, understand this. This channel isn't here to hype you up. It's here to align you. Subscribing isn't about videos. It's about making a quiet commitment to stop deceiving yourself, especially when it's convenient. In 2026, many will repeat the ritual. New words, old habits. The difference won't be who starts strong. It will be who starts awake. And awareness hurts, but it frees. The brain was never designed to sustain long-term decisions made in emotional states. It was designed to survive today. That's the route most people never examine. When you set goals in January, you're usually in an aspirational state. You imagine an ideal version of yourself and try to impose it on a biological system that runs on shortcuts. The problem is simple. The brain doesn't respond to ideals. It responds to immediate reward and discomfort reduction. There's a quiet bias at work here. The brain confuses intention with action. Just planning, writing, or talking about change releases dopamine, a small sense of progress. That's why people feel relieved after writing goals, even if they never execute them. Internally, the system logs it as partial completion. Now add social pressure, motivational content, and the collective energy of starting strong. You get a refined trap. You feel better for promising, not for doing. Eastern philosophy never trusted promises. In Zen, words are noise. Practice is what remains when excitement fades. Monks don't ask if they feel motivated to sit in silence. They sit. Because identity comes before emotion, not after. Here's the hard truth. You don't fail in January because you lost discipline. You fail because you built your plans around your excited self, not your tired one. And the one who actually runs your life isn't the excited version. It's the tired you on a random Tuesday morning when no one is watching. Until you design your life for that version of yourself. Distracted, limited, human, every plan stays fictional. January exposes this quickly. February confirms it. March buries it. This isn't a character flaw. It's poor mental architecture. There's an invisible cost to repeating this cycle year after year. It doesn't hit all at once. It accumulates. Every failed January doesn't just kill a goal. It slowly erodes the quiet trust you have in yourself. Over time, your mind learns something dangerous. Your words don't carry weight. Your commitments are negotiable. You can always try again, without ever sustaining anything to the end. This lesson doesn't stay confined to goals. It leaks into work, relationships, difficult decisions. You begin to see yourself as someone who starts, but doesn't finish. Someone who understands, but doesn't execute. Neuroscience calls this erosion of self-efficacy. Philosophy would call it loss of internal honor. Not public honor, internal. The one that exists when no one applauds, when only you know whether you kept your word. What's more alarming is how quickly the brain adapts. It begins avoiding situations that could expose another failure. You set smaller goals, safer ones, or stop setting them altogether, not out of laziness, but self-protection. This is where most people disappear. Because when you stop believing change is possible, you stop suffering from failure, you numb yourself. And numbness feels like peace, but it's resignation in disguise. Eastern masters feared this state more than mistakes. Mistakes still mean movement. Calm stagnation is the real collapse. If nothing changes in 2026, the risk isn't another bad year. It's solidifying the internal story that this is just who you are. And once identity locks in, effort feels like betrayal. That's the discovery few are willing to face. The real cost isn't unachieved goals. It's teaching yourself, year after year, not to take yourself seriously. At this point, the conflict is no longer external. It's no longer about goals or systems. It's about comfort versus truth. Comfort tells you to lower ambition, to reshape dreams around fatigue, to call adaptation maturity. Most of the time, it's just fear wearing better language. Fear of trying again and confirming what you already suspect. Discipline doesn't arrive as motivation. It arrives as friction, a quiet resistance, a refusal to obey the easiest impulse. That's exactly why it's avoided, because it demands something that brings no immediate applause: presence. This is the real battle. You know what needs to be done, not theoretically, practically. But there's a part of you that wants relief, distraction, escape. That part isn't evil. It just can't lead. Most people lose here because they try to win with intensity. They promise everything, cut everything, start everything at once. The brain reads that as threat and responds with sabotage. Eastern masters never fought comfort. They put it in its place. Comfort is a consequence, not a decision maker. When it decides, it rules. When it follows, it rewards. This shift requires radical humility. Accepting you won't feel ready. There will be no emotional green light. The path is built while the mind complains quietly. This is where 2026 is decided, not by the size of your goal, but by who you allow to make decisions when discomfort appears. If it's impulse, the cycle repeats. If it's awareness, something changes. This escalation doesn't end in explosion. It ends in choice. Small, almost invisible, repeated. The exit was never force, it was alignment. In 2026, real change doesn't begin when you decide to do more. It begins when you decide to negotiate less with yourself, when you stop trying to convince your mind and start structuring your life so it doesn't get a vote. Eastern philosophy calls this the path, not because it's beautiful, but because it's narrow. You don't need inspiring goals. You need simple rules that work when you're tired. Rules that respect biology, not speeches. One of them is this: never trust decisions made in emotional extremes. Not euphoria, not despair. What sustains a life isn't peaks, it's rhythm. Another rule: stop measuring progress by how you feel. Measure it by what you do when there's no validation. The brain learns through action, not intention. Each completed execution quietly rebuilds what was broken inside. Confidence doesn't come from positive thinking. It comes from accumulated evidence. Japanese masters never asked, "Who do I want to be this year?" They asked, "Which practice can I not abandon?" Identity follows, always. When you apply this, something shifts. January stops being special. February stops being a threat. The year no longer depends on dates, it depends on posture. And that's real freedom. Before you leave, do one simple thing. If you stayed until the end, comment the word lucidity. Not for me, for you. A quiet marker that this time you understood where you were failing. And if you want to keep walking this path with clarity, stay. Not out of habit, out of commitment. 2026 doesn't demand a new version of you. It only asks that you stop abandoning yourself.